right, my name is Nicholas Pitt, and I've been working on OpenLab. It was an idea I came up with last semester after trying to needing a graphical user interface for serial lab equipment, and not having a copy of LabVIEW, which is pretty darn expensive. So yeah, it's all about LabVIEW control software. Currently working on Serial, although hopefully I'd like to have a couple other plugins that people could do. And as I mentioned before, LabVIEW and other stuff, it's I've heard it's a total freaking nightmare to program. It's also pretty expensive. And the idea for this project would be to implement a plugin framework. So we would have plugins that other people could write, or I would write like a core set, and then put them out there, and then say if someone needed to run a certain piece of equipment and they needed something that wasn't already implemented, they could write it, and we'd have a plugin repository that people could contribute to, and it would grow a community is the idea. And also, what I'd like to be able to implement is creating forms or like on-the-fly frameworks. So if you worked with Visual Studio C#, the way that forms are done is very static. You drag the controls on, and then they're there, and that's it. Like, what I'd like to be able to do is load that all from files. So you have like an OLF configuration file, and then that would tell the application how to display the form and what plugins you're using and stuff like that. So yeah, we're in static forms. 4 different types of controls that are currently implemented. Just buttons like on/off to toggle equipment status. There's a people know it's like a spinner. It's to select values, numeric values. There's also just typing the entry into a box, text box, and that sends it over serial with the proper command. And just being able to display a numeric value that the equipment returns. Currently implemented is cubic spline calibration. So if you've worked with equipment, especially thermocouple gauges, the response curve is awful. It's this awful curve you get on a logarithmic scale. And the manual for the equipment I have gives you this difference of quadratic equations with these coefficients, which is a nightmare to try to calibrate. I was trying to figure out how they did experimentally determine these values, and it was over my head. So what I came up with was, instead of just trying to write one equation, why not use piecewise equations? So that's what, if people work with cubic splines, that's what they are. It's a series of equations where you give your algorithm a series of points, and there are a couple of constraints. Specifically, first and second order derivatives must be continuous, and it does this very nice property that minimizes bending. So you get actually very nice, perfect curve that fits your data points. And what I was looking for was on the end of the data points, sometimes with other types of polynomial fit functions, you get this strange loop or tail that doesn't look anything like the data. But with piecewise, it actually gives you pretty much what you're looking for. And I was able to model, or able to use equipment with this curve that this equation actually didn't work exactly correctly for, to a pretty accurate degree with using cubic spline. Also, PID loop support, just being able to tune your KI, KD, KPs, in a screen, enter those, maximum, minimums, stuff like that. Ideally, these would all be plugins. They're currently just coded directly in the program, but that's something to work on. All right, so what I've done this semester so far is researched into file formats. C# in Visual Studio has this built-in settings framework that I'm using currently to save all of the parameters, including the splines and points and stuff like that. It's kind of a pain, and you can't edit it other than using the default or using the program itself. So I'd like to be able to ideally have two programs. The first being the program that loads up your configuration file and your plugins and displays it. You can actually use it. And the second being a configuration builder that would allow you to drag and drop the plugins you need onto that, and then generate the config file. researching dynamic forms and then playing around with how to create forms without actually using their Visual Studio's resources for that, and interface design. The idea is currently I've got a calibration form that's just statically is a static form that has all the calibration fields and controls. I'd like to ideally have context menus. So as it works currently, it's broken down into group boxes for each piece of equipment, and then within that you should be able to right-click and say calibrate, and then it will bring up a specific calibration form for that piece of equipment or plugin or whatever you need. So that's what I'd like to get done. All right, generating forms from objects. I've already, C# has a nice, or .NET rather, has nice import functions for XML, use your objects. But I'd like to be able to parse those out again and then generate a form. Still working on that. Right, like I said, context menus still needs to be finished, and the plugin loader, which is turning out to be a nightmare. Demo. All right, so this is some code. Most of this I wrote actually last semester. It's OpenLab is the form. This is the form you use to control your piece of equipment. I have an Arduino hooked up over here with a program that just accepts values. So you select the port you want, update interval, saves log files, which is kind of nice. And then I don't think I didn't do the calibration. So this is the calibration form. It pops up. You can control your equipment so you can get it calibrated the way you want. You hit sample, it counts a sample, change the sample, do it again. All right. So, sample. Ideally, I'd like to have list views for these so you can choose the samples you want in case you click sample, you can actually want that sample. For some of these fields, I needed forward and reverse mappings. So let's say you want to set pressure for your thermocouple gauge. You need to be able to give an electrical input from the gauge. You need to be able to reverse that into, or convert it into a pressure, but then also be able to set a pressure and convert it back into an electrical signal. So I just swapped the X and Y points for calculating the splines, and actually keep two sets of splines, one for the forward calculation, one for the reverse. But it's all the same set of points. This is sample. And then, yeah, you collect data, control your equipment. If you disconnect it, this was actually a giant pain in the butt, it wouldn't disconnect properly. It actually works now. It took me a while to get. Oh, maybe not, it's frozen. Ah, crashed. Yeah, it doesn't like it if you disconnect serial. I couldn't figure out how to fix that in something in .NET. But anyway, then you get, well, it's not here. All right, well, because it didn't say it because it crashed. But it gives you a nice series of points and saves all your settings. So yeah, these are the settings I'm using currently, and the calibration form at the bottom has a function to calculate splines. There's a nice article on Wikipedia that gives you a pretty good pseudocode, which is just coded up. And I want to thank you to Sean O'Sullivan, Orthy, and Dr. Goldschmidt, and RCOS. Questions? Yes?
The spline you said you need to keep 2 copies. Is it not straightforward to derive one from the other, or is it that you keep 2 of them as like a speed optimization? Or?
That was just the first approach I came up with. I would imagine you probably could. I'm not sure how to do that though. But yeah, I'd imagine you probably would be able to. Yes?
For the plugins, you should load in the CS script because that will let you load up CS files in the compiler or just load in the DLL, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, sorry, what was it called?
CS-script.
CS script.
Yeah.
You may want to look into the reflection framework on OpenLab.net because that would allow you to do method discovery and DLLs and load them. I understand that.
You said this was
I think it's system.reflection or something.
Yeah. Reflection also, if you have a plugin, just throw in a class and have like an attribute on top to like get metadata for the plugin. That will also help.
And that you said it's probably CS script?
That attributes are part of C#. So
Yeah.
you just create custom attribute, throw it on your classes.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thank you.
The avenue was founded by one of RPI's trustees. So it is in fact, we know he donates money to RPI and so on. So if your project comes to something, he visits and he's a friendly person. So you can talk to him and so on. He will be willing to listen.
As long as I'm not stepping on his toes.
If you're stepping on his toes, he will let you.
Any other questions? Thank you.